On this episode of Insight, we are ready. CMS opens all school buildings for the return of students.
Because we have to make sure not only the cleanliness, but also the safety and the health of our staff and students returning.
Student-facing employees and their shot at the vaccine.
I encourage them to get their vaccines at the appropriate time.
Board chairperson Elise Dashu and the lessons learned from leadership.
Everybody has a firmly held, passionate opinion. So you gotta listen to all of that with empathy.
For this and more, we'll ask the superintendent for insight. Hello, I'm Winston, and welcome to Insight with CMS Superintendent Ernest Winston, the show that keeps you up to date on the issues and initiatives in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. It was almost a year ago when the CMS Superintendent and the CMS Board Chairperson announced that in-person learning at our schools would be suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with all schools ready to open, we welcome all students back to the classroom. CMS bus drivers and the fleet of over 1,000 buses are ready. CMS custodial staff, taking care of more than 170 school buildings, are ready. And CMS operational staff, teachers, and principals, properly prepared with procedures and PPE, are ready. In our community, there's been no shortage of opinions on the return to school, and that's why we spoke with CMS Superintendent Ernest Winston for Insight. Well, good afternoon, Superintendent Winston. It's good to see you once again.
Good afternoon, Coretta. It's good to see you.
Well, we have a lot to talk about in this issue or this episode of Insight. It's been almost a year since CMS closed its doors due to the pandemic, and it appears that we are finally about ready to open our doors back up to our students and to our staff. Why is this the right time to go back into the building?
We believe that this is the right time. Of course, at the national level, our president has urged us to return kids to in-person learning, and so too has our governor, Governor Cooper, and other state officials. Certainly, we were already along that path of bringing kids back for in-person learning. And we believe it's the right time because, one, we're ready. We've got the safety protocols and procedures in place. Our staff, our school-based staff, our principals, working with our learning community superintendents have done a tremendous job preparing and getting us to this point. And we know that in-person learning is the optimal environment for most of our students, because we do have students who thrive in remote learning as well. So I want to acknowledge that. But this is an opportunity to bring back students in person, and we're fully ready and committed to executing on our plans.
Of course, you've looked at the metrics and the numbers, and you've spoken to the county. What would close CMS once again? You do have the power to close schools if you see fit. What would be some of the things you would look at, and what would have to happen for us to go back to full remote?
So certainly it's not one particular factor that would cause schools to close. It is a variety of factors. I think an important factor in that decision, obviously we want to look at the metrics, both our community metrics as well as our district-wide metrics, but we also want to continuously monitor our staffing levels to make sure that they are where they need to be in order for us to provide a safe environment for our students. So there are a variety of factors.
Now, the board has given you the option to close individual schools. How would that work? What does that look like?
Yes, the board voted to recently provide me with the flexibility to close schools on an individual basis. And the board also recently gave me the authority to close parts of a school or a grade level in particular. And it's important to have that flexibility because you want to have as many tools in your toolbox as you possibly can, particularly during a pandemic.
You say that we're ready to go back into the classroom. Of course, some parents, some teachers are a little bit concerned. How do you make them feel at ease? That first day when everybody goes back, how will you make them feel at ease, and how can you help them understand that you've done everything possible to make sure that we are as safe as we can be in the building?
That's a great question, and I think back to when we initially had our elementary school students and staff members in our buildings. We had a subset of our students with disabilities, pre-K students, we had them back in the building. And I remember the anxiety and some of the apprehension that families and staff members had at that time. What we found was that once they returned to the building and they saw all of the protocols and safety measures that we had put in place, that anxiety and fear began to disappear. And so we believe once we bring more people back into our buildings, including those in our traditional middle schools and high schools who have not been in person this year, we believe the same thing will happen, primarily because of the protocols and the safety measures that we're taking.
We have about 60,000 students out of our 140,000 plus who have decided they will not return to the building. They've chosen to stay full remote. How do you plan to keep them engaged in learning?
So that is a significant portion of our student population. That's a choice that families have made, and we completely respect that and we honor that. And we are doing all that we can at the school level, principals and teachers, to keep our students in the Full Remote Academy engaged in learning. And we will continue to do that and make sure that we're providing the best possible instruction that we possibly can, as we will for our students who are returning for in-person learning.
And of course, teachers are prepared for the in-person and those who have decided to stay at home. Let's talk about vaccinations.
Yes.
Do you think that our teachers should be at the forefront of getting those shots?
Absolutely. But I do want to clarify that we teachers are extremely important to our school district, and we want them to I encourage them to get their vaccines at the appropriate time.
So when will that opportunity come for teachers and other staff to get that vaccine?
As far as our student-facing staff members, our governor announced recently that on February the 24th, that our student-facing staff members will begin to have that opportunity to receive a vaccination. And so we're excited about that. We're excited about that as we bring students back and staff members back in person.
Will you roll up your sleeves?
Absolutely, when it's my time, because I don't want to leapfrog over any other staff member, but certainly when it's my time to get the vaccine, I look forward to actually doing that.
Do you foresee a time when it will become mandatory for teachers and staff to get that shot?
You know, that's a great question, and I think that's a very personal question. And so that is not something that we have, as a school district, that we have mandated. And I frankly don't anticipate that we will go in that direction. But I do want to encourage staff members to get the vaccine. I think that's an extremely important task.
Well, of course, we have students returning back to campus, and some of those students are very excited because they get to participate in the performing arts as well as athletics. What's the plan to keep them safe and keep them on the field and on the stage?
Yes, we're excited to resume athletics and begin arts for our students who participate in those extracurricular activities. You know, it's important to remember that athletics, the arts, are a part of students' overall educational experience. And so we think it's important from that standpoint. Having said that, we have very strict protocols in place that we have spoken with athletic directors and coaches and advisors to ensure that we're following those proper protocols, because this is a privilege. And we want to not just begin these activities, but we want students to be able to continue to enjoy them throughout the rest of the school year.
A rite of passage for our students is the prom and also graduation. Last year, students missed both. Do you foresee us having a prom, getting dressed up, cap and gown, marching across the stage this time?
We do acknowledge that prom and graduation are important rites of passages for our students, and we have begun to look at that. We have a team that is exploring the possibility and to determine what can we offer. So that decision has not been made yet.
Any ideas yet?
We have some ideas surfacing. Certainly, we had successful drive-by ceremonies for graduations last year and at the mid-year point this year in January. And so those ideas are still on the table, but we have not made a decision just yet. More to come on that later.
More insight from the superintendent in a moment. We all know that change is inevitable during a pandemic, and CMS is adapting in many ways. So we asked CMS Deputy Superintendent Dr. Matthew Hayes, what's different in academics? Give us insight on lessons learned.
We will not come back into education the way we left it, meaning that the pandemic has exposed, as I said before, many things that we thought existed, but it just really opened them wide open, right? Some of the disparities, some of the inequities that we have across our community that we need to address, and how we need to address them. How are we going to support those schools? How will they always receive the best of what we have to offer in our district to get them where they need to be to serve our students the proper way?
Insight on lower than expected student enrollment.
So we saw the largest gap of students actually in our kindergarten group of students that just basically did not attend, did not come in. We also saw what we would normally see as an influx of students into our early grades. Kindergarten through third grade was not the same influx that we would see in years past. We really believe that that's really where a large majority of the loss in our numbers are generated. Many families that maybe have had kindergarten students probably said, I'm going to hold off for a year. Instead of sending my child in their first year during a pandemic, I'm going to wait and they'll go to school next year. And so we're looking to really, with excitement, to have them join us as we get ready to launch into next school year.
An insight on changes in how students will be graded.
We've also made some changes to our grading expectations that we have. A student cannot earn lower than a 50. On assessments or grade work. We've also increased the opportunity the student would have extra 5 days to turn in an assignment before it's counted off as late. We don't know exactly what is happening in all of our households that may prevent a student from getting that work done. If a student gets a 0 on an assignment, it takes over 2 full assignments equaling 100 each for them to even be able to pull a D out of that course. So what it does is it allows for students to have an opportunity of hope, that no matter what their situation is, there's still an opportunity that they can dig in and get the work done and be able to pass that course.
Welcome back to Insight. Nearly all of her time as chairperson of the CMS Board of Education has been during the COVID-19 pandemic that has emptied schools, ushered in virtual learning, and divided a community on when to bring students back. It's been a lesson in leadership for Elise Deshu. Ms. Deshu, thank you so much for joining us today, giving us some insight as we return to in-person classrooms and in-person school. Is now the right time to go back into the school buildings?
It is. It is the right time. I know we've been waiting a long time. I know there are a lot of parents who wish we'd gotten back sooner, but when you look at our readiness in the school, when you look at our staffing readiness and our PPE and the work we've done on our school buildings and the community rates, this is the right time. But of course it's on us to take every possible precaution to keep our students safe and to keep our grown-ups safe.
How difficult was that decision for you guys to make for us to go back into the classroom?
Oh, it's so hard. It's been so hard.
A lot of conversations.
Yeah. just, following the evidence from the epidemiologists, and the research continues to shift and change and evolve. And so, you've definitely had to be flexible and up to speed on all of that. And just listening to thousands of parents and teachers and employees, like bus drivers and teacher assistants and kids, and everybody has a firmly held, passionate opinion. So you got to listen to all of that with empathy, and then ultimately find the best solution that you can come up
And I
with.
wanted to ask you about that. I call it a lot of voices in your head. How do you make sure that you're giving everyone the information that they need to believe whatever it is that you're trying to convince them of?
Well, I don't know that I can convince anybody of anything. People are so divided right now in our nation. Everybody thinks their opinion about COVID is science-based and the other person's opinion is political. And I hear that from both sides. And so ultimately, I just have to be empathetic when I listen to whether it's a family that is worried about our readiness to go back, or whether it's a family that is worried about the risks of their kids doing in-person learning too long. I have to listen and learn from both perspectives, and then ultimately I have to follow the evidence and deal with the cards we've been dealt and make the best possible decision for our kids when there is no good decision a lot of times. There's only the least bad decision.
What does that conversation sound like? A parent calls you or a parent emails you, I want my child back in the classroom, or you get the opposite, I don't want my child back in the classroom. What does that conversation sound like if we could eavesdrop?
I don't think you'd want to eavesdrop on some of those conversations, because just the emotions have been incredibly intense for a year now.
Tell me this, and we spoke about this a second ago, there was no Pandemic 101 class that we attended to prepare us for this. And if it was the 8 a.m. class.
I wish I'd taken that class in college.
Yeah, you were thrown into this. What have you learned?
Well, I learned that we have some incredible staff in CMS, everyone from the superintendent to every single school teacher. And the work that they're doing is heroic. It was heroic before there was ever a pandemic, and it's heroic on steroids right now. Yes, we've had to change course so many times because the pandemic has unfolded in kind of a chaotic way, but definitely have learned a lot about how to pull a team together in a crisis.
What would be your message to Team CMS, the students, the teachers, and other staff, and the parents, as every single school opens its doors, embrace all of those students coming back on campus?
Socially distanced embrace.
Virtual hugs.
To be responsible, and that's for the community too. We have got to be smart. I mean, I'm starting to hear anecdotes of families planning big spring break trips. Oh, let's just be responsible because we're still in this pandemic. Kindness is so, so important. So it's be kind and be respectful.
Well, we certainly do appreciate your time, and we appreciate your insight as CMS students prepare to head back into the classroom with all campuses ready to welcome, I should say, Team CMS back.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I'm glad that we're here, and but yeah, we just all have to work together to make sure we stay safe.
Well, as we get ready to go back to school and we get ready to end this show, when I say back to school, back to the building, any final thoughts, any last thoughts you want to offer our team and our family members of CMS?
Yes, I would strongly encourage us all, because this is really a community effort. And although the numbers, the metrics are moving in the right direction, by no means are we out of the woods. And so I implore us to continue to do those things to keep us safe. I really ask our parents to make sure that we do not send students who are sick to school. We have reopened our schools for in-person learning, but we want to keep them open. And so that will be key in us being able to keep our schools open.
We'll be flexible and we'll be ready.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Students in CMS now have the option of returning to in-person learning at their school or continuing with virtual learning at their home. The steps that got us here put a top priority on the safety of all of our students and all of our staff. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you learned something that will help you become an informed parent, an energized employee, or an engaged community member. Your support is important to the success of CMS. Be safe and take care. We'll see you next time for more insight.
We do this for sanitation purposes to kill all the anything that's going on the bus with germs and of course COVID.
So here are the iPads that every student will get along with a charger.
It's different, but it is. I'm loving seeing the kids smile every day and being back at school, so I'm ready. We ready.